It's on? Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me, and I hope you already had a coffee and a Danish. My name is Zisha Novaseller, and I welcome you to this Tribe Works event. We expect to have a little less, we expect to have a little fewer people, a little smaller crowd than we usually have, which is good news because it means there's more food for all of us. So I'm expecting everyone to not only eat, but eat twice. You cannot be at this event unless you're eating. I'm responsible for the food. It's a great honor for me to introduce Dr. Noam Wasserman. It's even a bigger honor that I can count him among my closest friends. And Dr. Wasserman is going to be speaking on the topic, Think Like an Entrepreneur. Let me tell you about how fortunate you will all be to hear him. Dr. Wasserman is the Dean of the Cy Sims School of Business at Yeshiva University, a professor at Harvard Business School for 13 years. He has written 2 bestsellers. They are entitled The Founder's Dilemmas and Life as a Startup. He co-hosts the Founder's Dilemmas podcast with Charlie Harari and has 8 grandchildren and 8 children. That's a good beginning, Dr. Wasserman. And is nearing his 3rd Siyum Hashas. So with no further ado, I give you the great honor and pleasure to hear Dr. Wasserman speak.
Thank you so much, Zisha. I really appreciate it. Actually, give a little bit of an update in the middle of this on the Siyum Hashas front. I'll be able to give you a little bit of a couple months later reaction to that. But thank you everyone for coming. Welcome back to a lot of you to Tribe Works. We're going to kick off our morning by getting into a little bit of a different mode of thinking that we're going to see from a couple of different directions. We're going to see in particular bring together 2 things that aren't usually brought together. From the Torah side of this, we're going to be drawing on the millennia of wisdom that we've accumulated, the rabbis, the Talmud, other things that we will tap to be able to see a bunch of the things that might be able to help us adopt an entrepreneurial mindset, and then bring that together also with the entrepreneurial side of some of the modern thinking around entrepreneurship, some of the latest writings, some of it just translating that timeless wisdom into the modern world. But we're going to be bringing these 2 things, Torah u entrepreneurship, if you will, bring those together and see what kind of combination we might be able to have from bringing them. Okay, so on the way to it, we're also going to break it up into a couple of pieces. First is going to be within our own heads. This is something in Hebrew that we call ben adam la'atzmo, between us and ourselves. Some of the things we'll understand about our biases and ways of it, if we can tune into them, how we can reprogram ourselves to be able to be even more effective. And then we're going to broaden it. This is something we touched on a little bit last year in TribeWorks, but we're going to broaden it considerably and then add on another piece of being able to see the ben adam lechavero in Hebrew, the between you and others, the interpersonal, teamwork, other ways that we can see some lessons from entrepreneurs and how that thinking is also going to be able to enhance how we might be able to approach every time that we have some kind of interpersonal interactions, whether it's at home or whether it is in the workplace. And so that's the big picture of what we're going to go forward and do. Let me just pose a quick question that we're going to plant, a question given what is going on starting tomorrow night with Hanukkah. And we'll see this question, we'll put the pause button on it and then come back around to it at the tail end. And if you will, we'll hopefully go around and see if anyone has any thoughts, given the path that we're going to be taking, on the way to why we actually say something that I've said thousands of times. I'm sure that some people in this room have also. But I never really thought about it until relatively recently, what we say in it. So this is during both Hanukkah and Purim. We add this in when we are doing our prayers, when we are when we're saying grace at the end of our meals. Al Hanisim, we're thanking God for the miracles, Purkan, Gruat, Shuat, Milchamot, the wonders, all of these wonderful things that have happened. One of these 5 things seems to not belong. Which of them doesn't belong? Wars. Why are we thanking for a war? That would seem to be the exact opposite of what we would thank for, or that we would thank for the victory in the war, but it's actually just the war that we are thanking for here. We can understand it with the miracles, the salvations, but thanking for war doesn't make any sense. This is at least in Nusach Hashanah's. Other Nusachs drop this, interesting things about why they did. But question of why, after we've been saying it thousands of times, now let's think about why might we be saying thank you for that kind of thing? So now we're going to hit the pause button on it. We'll take a little bit of a path through some of the entrepreneurial thinking, and when we come back around, let's see if we have some insights that people can give into why we are thanking for the wars. So let's start off with a happy fact. All you entrepreneurs out here, have you heard that there's a high rate of failure in your business? Okay, that kind of information. There's very little data on startups, but this is one of the data points that I think has gotten pretty well known about knowing that there's a real high risk of failure in what you are doing. And so that begs the question, why do you do it then? Do you just shove it to the back of your mind and ignore it? How good does it feel when you fail? Does that feel good? No, devastating. There's the natural recoil that we have. When we fail, woe is me, head down on the keyboard, can't believe I did that, all sorts of regrets that come with that failure. That is the natural instinct. That's how we are built, human nature, to recoil from that kind of devastation. Let me give you, starting to tap now from the Torah side, a little bit of one mode of thinking that we have to retrain ourselves to do, and we can see some examples of how to be able to do it. In Hebrew, Gamzu Latova, this will also be for the best. Who comes to mind, for those who are familiar in the Talmud, as the ultimate examples of this mode of entrepreneurial thinking? So Nachum Ish Gamzu, who is named in some ways after, or is nicknamed after this. Hey, who else? Rabbi Akiva. Is there a connection between the two of them? We actually think that Rabbi Akiva learned under two of the all-time greats, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. But actually, Gemara tells us that he learned for 22 years under Nachum Ish Gamzu. He was actually his longest running Rebbe. And so there is very much a connection between what you were highlighting and the example that Rob was giving about who we can look to as the entrepreneurial thought leaders, if you will, from the Talmud. What comes to mind in terms of Rabbi Akiva? What kind of examples would you have around that? Examples? Okay, the fox running through the destruction. So the last page in the Tractate Makos about the fox running through the destroyed temple, the Shual running through the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, devastating. Rabbi Akiva was there seeing this, along with several of the other senior rabbis. In fact, he was relatively young at that point, and the senior rabbis were devastated by seeing this. And he took a very different approach to it. He had a very different look to that, seeing that this actually foreshadows a lot of light that's going to be coming, a better day that we can be able to see, and seeing ways in which that bad actually is going to become latova, is going to become for the better. Let's take a look at another example with Rabbi Akiva. What is the most famous Seder, Pesach Seder, in history? In some realms, yes. Bnei Brak. Okay, where do we talk about this? The beginning of our own Pesach Seders. We talk about the Seder in Bnei Brak. Who lived in Bnei Brak? Okay, no, there's only one of them who lived in Bnei Brak. It's actually Rabbi Akiva who lived in Bnei Brak. He had those four senior rabbis, his two Rebbeim, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, along with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Gadol Ador. They actually were coming to him to have the Seder. Would it make sense when you have a Rebbe Do you have him come to your house, or do you go visit him? You go visit him, especially on holidays that you're supposed to do that. And so, a little bit baffling in that sense. They're going to the junior person. Also, one of them, Rabbi Eliezer, actually, in the Tractate of Sukkah says, don't you dare leave home on a holiday. That's for you to be home with your family. And yet he left his home to go to Bnei Brak. So what was going on with that? Why did they come around the table with Rabbi Akiva for that? So the author of the Aruch HaShulchan actually says that that was right after the fox running through the Beis HaMikdash. They had seen Rabbi Akiva is able to have himself see a glimpse of what can come out of this that will be for the positive. And in particular, let's go back into the entrepreneurial side of it. What was the blueprint, what was the business model of Judaism until that point? It was bricks and mortar with the Beis HaMikdash. For Pesach, it was the korbanos, it was bringing the sacrifices with the Korban Pesach in particular. With the destruction now, what is Pesach? There is no brick and mortar anymore to go to. There is no sacrifice that you can bring, the Korban Pesach. They were swimming in what is the future of this religion. And so they were going, the Aruch HaShulchan says, to go and learn from Rabbi Akiva, how do we have to pivot? How do we have to be able to react to this new state of the world and be able to have Pesach come out of it and have this, the future of Judaism be reset for us? And so that was why they were coming to Bnei Brak. And so we can see in some ways, this is what we're talking about, you have your early idea within your startup. You're taking a look, your MVP, you've deployed it. Your minimum viable product that you're trying and testing on the market. You're trying to read some of the signals, be able to see, is this going to work or not? Well, if it's not working, are you going to be able to abandon it? Are you going to be able to read how you're going to have to pivot? Because something has happened that tells you that some of it is valid, but some of it isn't, and we have to change the ladder of those. Or is this something we can keep going with, but it's not going to be so good that we can scale it? And at the top here, scaling it up. And so this is where we can see some of the entrepreneurial thinking around how do we pivot Judaism. This is, I couldn't resist putting in a Maccabee slide, a pivot with basketball. Okay, you're not changing everything. You are just changing one foot, essentially. The other one has to stay planted. That's what you're doing when you are pivoting. And so we had that pivot that was going on also, and this is for you to show a little bit of the update. So we had Rabbi Akiva helping lead that pivot, but actually something else that I focused on back just before Rosh Hashanah, I actually had my Siyum HaShas that I was doing in honor of the 100th anniversary of the founding of Daf Yomi, world-changing innovation that happened at Rosh Hashanah 1923. And so I actually did double daf for this last cycle so that I could finish it in time to be able to do my Siyum HaShas just before Rosh Hashanah for the 100th anniversary on Rosh Hashanah 2023. And so what I focused on there was actually the other person, contemporary of Rabbi Akiva, who led the pivot. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Tein li yavna v'chachamea, give me not the brick and mortar, but give me the people, and let me help with them be able to recreate Judaism around shuls, around schools, around the learning, and be able to pivot. So between the two of them, of their being able to reform Yiddishkeit into what we know today and still have those echoes until now. So anyways, getting back into Rabbi Akiva, let's go to another one of the stories that we're going to be able to see some echoes also to today of. This is from Tractate Brachos, Daf Samach. Anyone familiar with Rabbi Akiva not being able to get lodging in a town? And what happened with that? Does that sound familiar to people? Okay, what was that? You remember what happened with it? Okay, so variety of the things that he had along with him, great. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva, during dangerous times, is trying to get to a town and be able to stay there. Finds that it's full, there's no occupancy in the town. They don't have a place for him. He's now going to have to pitch his tent outside the town during these dangerous times. How are you feeling right now if you find that out? Does that feel good? No, not at all. This is the recoil instinct that we have. Woe is me. If Rabbi Akiva had a keyboard, his head would be down on it. However, he was able to, through the 22 years of what he had learned under Nachum Ish Gamzu, stay in the game. Let's keep with it. Let's be able to dig ourselves out of that recoil instinct. So he goes outside the town, pitches a tent, but at least I have my companionship, my donkey. At least I have a candle with the light that it'll be able to bring to me amidst that darkness. And so he's keeping himself in that game. Dark comes. Soon, a wild animal comes and kills his donkey. His mode of transportation is gone. How are we feeling right now for Rabbi Akiva? Even possibly, we're getting even further into the problems here. But what does Rabbi Akiva say? Stay in the game. Persist. Keep going with it. But at least I have some light here. Wind picks up, blows out the candle. How are we feeling? Woe is me. Rabbi Akiva, Gamzu Latova. Stay in the game, keeping through this. He's able to get himself through the night. Sees the sun coming up. And remember what did he see when he saw the town? Okay, it had been attacked overnight. Everyone in the town had been killed. That would have been me, is what Rabbi Akiva realized. Now, in retrospect, seeing why to not recoil, why to actually see and stay in the game. Let me just take a little bit of a tangent for a second. Does anyone know where they were on March 3rd, 2020? Think back to then. What was going on then? Does anyone, you know where you were? Yeah, a little bit late. It was just before Purim. It was just as COVID was coming on. I was down in D.C. Is anyone else down in D.C.? Okay, it was the APAC conference. Thousands of people coming together in D.C. First time I'd ever been at APAC. This was my first year at YU. YU would bring down 75 students to be able to see what's going on, participate in it, be able to help shape a bunch of things, be able to talk to a variety of the political players down there. We're in the big room. It was around 9:30 in the morning. Thousands of people listening to the major players up on stage talking about Israel-related things. There was a seat that was open next to me. The YU Dean of Students, Chaim Nissel, came and sat down in that seat, and he uttered the one line that echoed for years, in some ways also already still has some echoes. Chaim said, "Did you hear what happened at SAR?" Anyone know what was happening at SAR at that time? That was the ground zero case in New York of COVID. The father of an SAR student had been that patient. The school had shut down. We have the echo still coming for that. Next morning, 7:15 in the morning, after the early minyan, we had a call between the deans and the provost. Decided to shut down YU because one of his other sons was a SciSim student. And so these were the things that were echoing back then. Does anyone, so this is that story. I didn't even know that there was a Riverdale Press until I went to go and do a quick search and see about it. But March 3rd, 2020, SAR closes. Can anyone figure out what the daf was that day? What the page in the cycle was on March 3rd, 2020? This is about 2 months after we had finished the prior cycle. The daf that day was Brachos Daf Samech, the one that we were just talking about, with Rabbi Akiva having to get himself back up amidst disaster and be able to see where there might be a glimpse of light that might be able to come from it. Essentially, we were getting a signal that we're about to get hit by the major disaster of COVID. And we're going to have to fight hard to be able to find ways to be able to get a glimpse of the positive amidst what is about to hit us. So some very interesting echoes of some of those signals, and we have some of it also echoing now for the last 2 months, about as we are hitting a whole bunch of things that are real challenges, can we rise to them? Think about amidst COVID, were there any positives that came from it? Lots of devastation, health, things like that. But are there ways that you got stronger from it? Okay, so some were able to turn it into being able to have a very positive business aspect to them. That might be a little controversial now about whether that's an overall positive, but, but a very different mode that other people might be able to take advantage of and be able to do things like that. On the personal side, whether we're, Keith? Okay, very interesting. So this is where we might have, and this also gets into any of those positive changes, could we make them stay? Could we be, or are we going to lapse back into the old model? Are we able to find ways that we can build those new routines, be able to build those new habits and maintain them? But think about some of the positives that might have come from that. But we essentially had Hashem giving us a signal. Watch for, amidst the disaster, the things you might be able to do that are going to be on the more positive side of it. So let me give you a little bit of a modern framing to this. I doubt that too many people have seen this, but anyone familiar with Anti-Fragile? Okay. Oh, great. So we got some in the back there. Okay. This is by the author of something you might have heard of, The Black Swan. There's this follow-up to that. The engineer in me, this concept really resonated with me. Let's talk about 3 different types of systems. First, there's the fragile system. What happens when a fragile system hits a bump in the road? What's going to happen to it? It's going to break. It's going to come crashing down. What do we aspire to better? A neutral system. What's going to happen with a neutral system when it hits a bump in the road? Hopefully persist, keep going, still be able to operate in the same way. What would an anti-fragile system be? That it gets stronger from the bumps in the road. Okay, humans in what sense? Okay, very interesting. So what's an example of that? Okay, so great. So muscles. You work out? Okay. Do you lift weights? What are you doing when you lift weights? What are you doing to your muscles? You're tearing your muscle. Doesn't that sound absolutely devastating? Why would you want to tear your muscles? Well, God has made us anti-fragile. God made our bodies that with these small setbacks, that we actually get stronger from them. So great examples around the biology around it. What else were we all wishing for back on March 3rd, 2020? What were we wishing that they would be able to develop? Vaccines. The immune system. Is the immune system anti-fragile? Okay, what does a vaccine do to the immune system? It attacks a precursor, a small attack, in order to have it be able to learn how to be able to fight back when there's a big attack. And so God developed us as anti-fragile. Some ways in the outside world, how can we be able to think about our being able to think ahead to when we hit the bumps in the road so that we can actually be able to get stronger from it? So to me, this is another step beyond Rabbi Akiva. If we take a look at how we might be able to take that all-time great and maybe see how we might be able to become proactive about the Gamzot Tovas, that's one of the key things that we can be able to take away a little bit from that modern entrepreneurial thinking. I don't think they've come out with a Hebrew translation yet for Anti-Fragile, so I decided to create the cover for them, decided to propose a title on the book for them. Essentially, this is just modern updating and enhancing of the Gamzot Tova mindset that we just saw before. But we're taking it even one step further. Our becoming a proactive partner with Hashem in order to make things into a Gamzot Tova, make them better. And if we can be able to do that, that's where we can seize the reins entrepreneurially to be able to have every setback become something that's going to make us even stronger. Let me give you an example from what we just read this past Shabbos, the Torah portion. We talk about Israel, our name on it as a nation. Where does that come from? That came from this past Parsha, when we had Yaakov wrestling And this is the pasuk that it's talking about it. You will be named Israel because sarita, you struggled, vatuchal, and you succeeded. If you're creating a people and you want to have them aspire to greatness, would you name them after the struggle? Or would you name them after the victory? You would think it would be the vatuchal, and you succeeded. That would be our name. And yet, we are actually named for the sarita, the struggling. Very interesting thing to think about that path that we take on the way to victory and the emphasis of it with the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride, the bumps in the road, as being what is the embodiment of our name. There's all sorts of things. Sorry that this is one of my few textual slides. But this is across all of a lot of different Jewish thinking about the benefits of the struggle, the benefits of these setbacks, the ways in which it gives us added wisdom. Also, a lot more of the self-reflection and the insight into ourselves that we get from it. Ways in which the resilience by the struggle we're able to have a lot better of an ability to be able to come back when it becomes very much a bigger challenge. Being able to develop more of the emunah, the faith and the trust that things will be able to turn out better, as Rabbi Akiva was doing. And so several recurring themes across Judaism and Jewish thinking around that. Let me give you one other example. People familiar with Rav Noach Weinberg? That's all-time Jewish social entrepreneur. Founded possibly one of the most important educational institutions in the world over the last few decades, Torah. This is coming from a tweet that one of my close colleagues at YU, Rav Aryeh Leibowitz, had, quoting Rav Noach about his journey. What he said is that failure is not the opposite of success, but it's precondition. Why is that? Because Rav Noach failed 4 times at founding institutions before he finally succeeded at being able to build an Torah, a world-beating entity. What if he had thrown in the towel after the second one or after the third one? We would all be the poorer for it. We would not have had all the things that Aish has brought to the landscape. I was actually hoping that as I was delving into the story behind Rav Noach, I was hoping to find that he would have failed 7 times. That would have been an echo of a very famous pasuk, a very famous observation from Mishlei about a tzaddik falls 7 times and still gets up. But as it turns out, it was only 4 times before he did. Okay, but this is an example of being able to bring that resilience, the learning, the thinking differently because the failure forces us to question our assumptions, all the other things that we were seeing around the resilience side, about being able to bring that mindset and being able to hone it through all the ups and downs, even for the all-time Jewish serial social entrepreneur that was Rav Noach Weinberg. Let me give you a little bit of a glimpse also of some actionable things that we can take from this before we head into the interpersonal side of this. So I have a daughter who, after graduating from YU and before starting medical school, went and served in the IDF for 1.5 years. I was talking to her about some of the things that she was going through. I had never really thought about boot camp. Never really appreciated what goes on in boot camp. But hearing from her firsthand what we were going through gave me a very different lens on it. Are you fighting a war in boot camp? No. So how's it preparing you for when the real things hit? Essentially what you are doing is building those muscles in the small so that when the big challenges come, you've been able to tune up and be able to practice them. You've been able to do the equivalent of being able to have the immune system be tested in the small so that when the big is coming, you'll be able to fight back on that. And that's what she was going through in boot camp. And so what we can do to be able to build this is find essentially the boot camps of life, the small setbacks. Every day, we have some kind of a setback. Whether it's as we were driving here this morning, that we run into a detour sign, whether we have to then be able to scramble and figure out a better way to it. One of my other daughters last week was telling me about how, when she was in Israel, she was trying to get to a family that she was going to go to for a Shabbos, and the road that she was supposed to take was blocked. She couldn't get there. She had to find a different way around it. Well, it turns out the following week, she was going to somewhere nearby, and she had to know that road. It actually helped her be able to be prepared later on for it. The initial woe is me, if we can see it as an opportunity to learn new places, be able to see the other routes that actually might be better ones than what we thought we wanted to head into. Those are some of the ways in which we can train ourselves in the small, the little things that happen each day, so that we'll be able to have that recoil muscle be able to be replaced with the Gamzela Tova muscle. Other things, if you have kids in school, they wanted to do well on a test, they didn't do so well, they want to bury it. You're not about to put it into your folder of, oh, they're great successes that you're going to save forever. Should you be burying that? Or should you be helping them see that that bump in the road, that -1, that crossed out question, is an opportunity to learn even better than they had? Is an opportunity to realize where they had a blind spot, where they had a hole in their knowledge. And now they'll be able to see that for life, they'll be able to remember that question even better because it was a -1 on it. So find those small ways in which those kinds of things are going to be able to help build that resilience, whether it's you, your kids, anyone around you, that we can be able to reframe those setbacks in a much more productive way, as we see from Rabbi Akiva, as we see from entrepreneurs, and the ways in which they can be able to become partners and being able to make it into something better. So now let's shift gears to the interpersonal. Let's take a look now, not just within your own head, but then at when you're interacting, whether it's within teams or any other kinds of relationships that you have with people. Let's reach back for the entrepreneurial lesson, but with a little bit of a Jewish flavor, to the founding team of the world. Who was the founding team of the world? Okay, Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava. Just read this a few weeks ago. What is the two-word encapsulation of the interpersonal, of the relationship between Adam and Chava? Okay, Ezer Kenegdo is how the Torah captures that. A helper against you. Seems to be an oxymoron. Seems to be a bit of a contradiction. There's actually lots of analysis of it that the rabbis do to try to understand what is going on with it. Let me take a look first at the all-time great commentator, Rashi. Unfortunately, I didn't have any real pictures firsthand of him, so best you can do is taking it off the wine bottle. Okay? Does anyone remember what Rashi says about what Ezer Kenegdo means? We'll do some review. Okay, if you merit, then you will get the Ezer, get the help. If you don't merit, then you'll get the Kenegdo. Then you'll get the pushback. What does that say when you get criticism? When you get feedback, a critique? Well, what is Rashi saying? That we're going to be seeing it as, I wasn't worthy of better. If I would have merited having the support, then that would be the positive side of it. I must be doing something wrong. My recoil, all sorts of ways in which that natural recoil thing is also in the interpersonal realm. When you have a performance review and you hear something that is not so glowing, does that feel great? No, that is I wasn't worthy of getting better. So Rashi is capturing our natural human instinct and how we've been built, human nature. The Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, much more recent, a couple of centuries ago, one of the all-time great commentators also, actually says, Rashi, you're looking at the wrong part of this. It's actually the Kenegdo, the pushback and the critique, is the Ezer, is the thing that helps us. Someone was willing to go out of their way to show us where we're not reaching our potential, where we can do better. That is actually the greatest blessing. That is not something that we should be recoiling from. Instead, we should be thanking that person for doing that for us. And so a very different take on the interpersonal that should have echoes of that recoil that we have when a negative thing happens, but now, within the interpersonal, how we should be looking at it in a very different way. And so I can give you a little bit of a translation into the entrepreneurial realm. Back when I was teaching at Harvard, one of my students was a woman named Jessica Alter. When she graduated, she took some of the things that we learned in my Founders Dilemmas course and founded a company called Founder Dating. that translated some of the interpersonal and the other things around understanding your own mindset, your own biases, into helping people become better teammates, find better co-founders, and then be able to architect a better relationship. She wrote a blog that captured Ezer Kenegdo wonderfully. She talked about the critical thing that founders have to learn how to do is fight well. How to be productive at disagreeing. That is the critical skill in the interpersonal realm within your founding teams that you have to be able to learn to do well. Some very interesting research that one of my professors at Harvard, Richard Hackman, alav shalom, that he did on orchestras. Anyone here? Any musicians here? Okay, got it. So what would you expect in terms of who's going to play well? An orchestra that's at each other's throats, or an orchestra that is all kumbaya and all very harmonious? Okay, so you'd think that would be, and that would be my instinct also. I'm not a musician, but I'm married to a violinist all up through med school. She was in the doctor's orchestra and things like that. She fostered in our kids and things like that, so I'm surrounded by them, but that would be also my instinct about who's going to play better. So this is more in a mid-range one. I painted a couple of extremes for you, but what Richard found is that the orchestra that played well, that played the best, was actually what he called the grumpy orchestras. The orchestra where there's some creative tension, that it's not all kumbaya. Pushing each other to the greater heights, being able to see ways in which we can do better. Yes, that was a great performance, but. And so the ways in which we can have it not be that we're papering over the issues, but where we're surfacing them and helping each other get to something better. There's also another one, very different realm, that when I saw this image, I thought it captured it very well, but it's not anything that though it's an echo a little bit of one of the examples that we had before. Bodybuilding. These are two star bodybuilders. They are the Harrison twins. What do they attribute their being able to rise to the top of their profession? To exactly what you can see here in this image. Them literally pushing each other to greater heights. Because I had my twin brother who was showing me where I was falling short, I was able to become even better at what I was doing. Are there any examples we can think of from Jewish education, the modes that we have within Jewish education, where we have that same kind of a dynamic? Two people pushing each other? The Chavrusas, you have these duos who are learning partners, who are together, say, for a year or maybe more. This is a recent one this is a recent picture from the YU base medrash. Two of them who sometimes will be yelling at each other to be able to get the other to understand what they're missing in the things that they are learning. Pushing each other to the greater heights to be able to understand even better. They're papering over it and just saying, okay, I'm not going to bother with that. Okay, you got it wrong. We're not going to bother pushing back or anything like that. We're all the worse for that. And so we have the Chavrusa duo, that's the basic building block of how we have the interpersonal, and the Kenegdo, the pushing back, as being the Ezer, the helping part of it, built into our fabric about the learning that we do together. Interesting thing that we can think about within the Gemara, going back to the Talmud, who are the all-time most prominent and greatest of the Chavrusa duos, of the learning duos? Okay, well, they were combatants, they were Balei Machlokas, they weren't really Chavrusas. Okay, the same kind of thing. We see a little bit of them learning a little bit, but Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We have the two of them throughout where we see recurringly the dynamic between the two of them as they are learning together. In particular, a very central page, the tractate of Bava Metzia, Daf Pei Daled. Why is Pei Daled easy to remember? What's it backwards? Daf. Okay, whenever people are able to cite for you what page something happens on, it's probably because there's a mnemonic. And so, Daf Pei Daled. This is where we see how Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish meet, how then they evolve as a Chavrusa duo, its demise, and then Rav Yochanan is disconsolate because of having lost the person who pushed him, the person who was his Kenegdo, helping him be able to become the greatest of the generation. The most cited, great trivia question, the most cited across all of Shas Bavli is Rabbi Yochanan. He attributes it to his chavrusa, to getting pushed by Reish Lakish. And yet, when he loses Reish Lakish, now what am I going to be able to do? So they have a great solution. Let's take another one of the greats, Rabbi Elazar ben Padas. He's the new learning partner. Anyone remember how well that went? Okay, actually pretty badly. What was that? There was a disconnect in terms of how they were approaching it. Rabbi Yochanan said, what I need from you is what I got from Reish Lakish. He would throw 24 darts at everything I said. His objections were what helped me raise my level of play and deepen my thinking around these. From you, I just get messiahlach. I just get support after support. I need you to push me harder. And so they had to go their separate ways. It did not work. If we think back to Ezer Kenegdo and the two perspectives that we had on it, Rashi and the Netziv, what was Rabbi Elazar ben Padas trying to bring to the table? Who was he? He was the Rashi one. I should bring support. You merit having my supporting you in every way possible. What was Rabbi Yochanan looking for? He was looking for the pushback. He was looking for the Netziv. It's very interesting when we take a look at where was Rashi bringing this perspective from. If you look in the Gemara, in Yevamos, who do you think said that if you merit, you'll get the support? If you don't merit, you'll get the pushback? It was actually Rav Elazar ben Padas. And so all the way the echoes of what embodied him, his style of thinking, his interpersonal mode, that was coming all the way there, and we see it firsthand on Bava Metzia Daf Pei Dalet. Let me give you also some of the things in terms of one of the things that we are commanded to do, which is to give tochacha, give pushback to each other. Is that easy to do? Is that easy to give and also to receive? So this is the Gemara in Erechim talking about that. So we have first that there is that obligation. Then we have Rabbi Talvan saying, I would be surprised if anyone in this generation can take rebuke. There's not just the giving of it, but there's the taking of rebuke. Who do you think was the one that was held up as the ultimate example of someone who could take, push back, and be able to turn it into something positive? It's Rabbi Akiva. That is what Rabbi Yochanan ben Duri said, that I would accuse Rabbi Akiva, I would push him back, things like that. All sorts of ways that I was criticizing him, and he thanked me. He actually loved me even more. He showered me with even more love for doing so. This is part of that retraining, being able to see the opportunities where we can be able to help each other rise to the occasion, but also receiving it in the right way. That requires also taking that entrepreneurial lens on reprogramming ourselves to be able to welcome that kind of pushback. This is also in the personal realm. This is actually something I learned from one of my students. Embodying Rabbi Hanina, the most that I learned was from my students. I had a student who came by when I was teaching very much deeply in the founder realm, and he said to me, Noam, I'm not going to be a founder, but your course has changed my marriage. Not at all what I thought I was teaching. Didn't understand where he was coming from. But he said, I'm a newlywed, we're struggling with the interpersonal, and I'm seeing all of these things in terms of the entrepreneurial thinking and these best practices that I'm bringing into my marriage. And that's what led me to be able to see a lot more of the wider applicability around these types of questions, and a lot of the challenges we face in life, and how we can be able to take a lot of those lessons. And so in that interpersonal realm, how can we make sure that we're going to be even more effective at being able to do it than we are succumbing to the recoil, to the avoiding the kenegdo, and all the other things that go into that. And so in terms of some of the things that we have to think about, just going back into some of the ones that we've talked about, when we have that natural recoil, catch yourself and start thinking instead, is this actually a way that this is going to become even better because I've heard this? Is this the kind of thing that is actually a bracha, that is actually an azer, that is a help for me? So as you catch yourself, be able to reframe it as a helping hand, helping me be able to scale that mountain as that I'm trying to climb by being able to have that helping hand on the way to it. This is actually something that we've even just built into some of the things that go on within some of the organizations that I'm working with. I actually just got back from Tampa, where the Orthodox Union was doing a conference for 200 of the executive directors of schools, of day schools across the country. So I gave them an example of when I was chairing the board of directors of Torah Academy in Boston, we actually built Ezer Kenegdo into the norms for the board. That's what we have up here. First off, fight hard until we get to a decision. Ask the difficult questions. Make sure we're anticipating pitfalls and unintended consequences. Ezer Kenegdo with our committees. Be able to have the ways in which we're going to push them to the higher heights and be able to have them do better recommendations to us. And then when they make the recommendation, then the Sanhedrin rules kick in. We are all behind the decision. All sorts of things that we can tap from the millennia of wisdom and bring it into the modern day and be able to build it into the fabric of the processes and the interpersonal norms that we bring to the table with it. Okay, so let me just give you another example from Cy Sims. This is something that I found invaluable when I was a professor at HBS. Asking the students for something that is actually very difficult to do. Give me feedback middle of the semester. Tell me what we can do better. Tell me what is not going well in class. I found it invaluable once I got over the hurdle of the difficulty of doing that kind of thing. Found it huge for helping me be able to improve things, be able to have them benefit from their feedback because they have a half a semester to do it. And so this is the kind of thing that when I came to Cy Sims, I just suggested to some of the professors, maybe we should also have this as an option for people. First semester, back in the fall of 2019, we had 7 bold pioneers who were willing to ask for the Kenegdo, ask for the critique, and then be able to incorporate it in to see how it's going to be an Ezer for them. This past semester, when we did it, 51. Over time, you can see it as, that was our MVP, our minimum viable test, our pilot of it, and then how you're able to take the lessons, iterate on it, whether it's pivoting, whether it's all sorts of other ways that you're taking that feedback and improving the product, and then scaling. And so finding ways that you can be able to take that mindset and be able to have the difficult thing about the pushback on it. And so let me give you just a couple of other resources before we wrap that might be useful for you. One, Zisha already mentioned. If you want to learn a little bit more about both the founding side and also the entrepreneurial mindset that emerges from it, Charlie Harari and I did a podcast 3 seasons worth that we wrapped up recently. And so just go and do a search for the Founders Dilemmas podcast. You'll be able to hear a bunch of things around these types of issues, the lessons that we learned from founders, those of you who are founders understanding the early decisions you make that are going to get you into trouble, and how we can reprogram ourselves to be able to think differently and take some best practices around being able to do it. That's the first of the resources for you. We also have in the room here today, I didn't realize that you were going to be here, but people who want more than just the podcast to be able to build a foundation, be able to get that training. We have our new MBA program at YU that we introduced 2 years ago. A core of the fabric of it is entrepreneurship, with several other things in terms of business analytics, in terms of several of the other pillars of it. And so guys that we have here in front row who are taking advantage of that as they're founding startups, and they're going to be able to see all sorts of ways that's going to help refine it. If that kind of a long-term investment makes sense for you, then that's another resource for you. If you can't bite off, though, an entire program worth, there's actually a new wing of YU, and the head of it is here today, Dr. Daniel Wozniak, that enables you to get smaller bites at it, course level, certificate level, and things like that. And so that's something for you to check out. She's going to be doing a session later today, or you can go to their website, YU Global, to be able to see what kind of offerings they have. There's going to be some things from some of the themes from today around artificial intelligence, being able to see how you can build your skills in that and then apply it into your business, and other walks of it that you'll see on that site there. And so several things, if you want to go deeper into this beyond the small hour that we have together, that you'd be able to add that on as some other resources for you. And so with that, let's just return right now to the question that we opened with. Do we have any kind of an answer now for why the milchamos, why the wars? We would actually say a thank you for having them, a thank you for the struggle. Why would we say that? Because what? Because hopefully we get stronger from the. Are there ways in which the current war that we can say it's actually been a strengthening despite all the devastation that we've suffered? How? Okay, so we were fragmented, we were coming apart, and what instead have we had? The unity that was so hard to achieve in any other way. One of the things that has enabled us to be able to come together. To me, TribeWorks has always embodied that unity. The full spectrum of people that we have coming together in the pursuit of a full day worth of things that we can do together. But we have now at a national level that we're going to be having that together. And so think about other ways in which we actually can find amidst war ways to get stronger from it. And then tomorrow night, when we are saying Allah Nisim for the first time, think through some tangible ways that you might be able to take the struggles in life, be able to find the challenges that can become the training grounds, the boot camps, for us to be able to get stronger from those things that we are faced with so that when the big things come, we're going to be even better suited to it. And so with all of this, bringing it together as you're climbing that mountain, hopefully you're going to be even better suited to be able to celebrate at the top because all of us benefit from the entrepreneurial endeavors that you have. We talked about the ways in which Rav Noach Weinberg is still impacting the world long after he founded Aish. All the things that you are doing, other ways that you're contributing and impacting the klal, the country, and the world. Best of luck with that, and very much thank you for coming this morning, and enjoy the rest of the day.